Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Elvish inspired wirework necklace. And this is what mine looks like using the materials here that I've chosen. So what I'm using is a silver wire to make the base, and then I'm using these purple and copper beads that I've added afterwards to just add a bit of colour to it. You can also choose to leave the base free and not add beads. That will give a really nice look as well. But what we have is a braid starting from one side here, going all the way to the other side, a regular 3-strand braid, but then I've added in these loops along the way that's going to give it that more elvish feel. And right here in the middle we have this little drop, so it creates this shape that's going to lay really nicely on the neckline. What I've then done as well is I've added my chain to either end of the braid, and then I have a clasp there. Obviously you can add whatever you want to. Then what I also thought would look nice is if you do want to add in some beads, but maybe instead of using something like this to add this kind of colour, it would work really nicely if you say add some Swarovski beads and pearls. It would make a lovely bridal necklace as well, I thought. But obviously that's completely up to you. So if you want to learn how to make this necklace, then keep watching. So it's these materials that we're going to be needing. Now first of all we need our wire. So I'm using two different gauges of regular round silver coated wire. The first one here is a 0.4mm. This is going to be the wire we're going to add the beads with. And then here I'm using a 0.8mm, and this is going to be the base wire that we're going to be braiding with. And then the beads that I'm adding in for the embellishment are these 4mm rounds first of all. These are just purple coated quartz gemstone beads. And then here I have 3mm rounds, and these ones are copper metal spacer beads. And we'll also need some chain. You can really use whatever chain that you want to. And then our findings here at the end, I've got a lot of claw clasp, extended chain, and some jump rings to put it all together. So let's get materials ready and let's get started. And then we'll need some lengths of our wire. And what I have here first of all is 4 lengths of the 0.8mm of about 40 centimeters each. And these are going to be used for the braid. And then I have another length here of the same wire, but this one is 70 centimeters long, and this is because it's also being used for the braid, but this is the one we're using to make all the little loops. And then we're going to need one length of a 0.4mm wire here, of about 1 meter, and this wire is going to be used to add the beads with. So the first thing we need to do is get out the longest length of our base wires, and we need to find where the midpoint is. Once we found that, I'm then going to get my 6-step bail making pliers as well, because I'm going to be using these loops here, or these sizes, to make some loops to begin with. So what I'm going to start out with is using the second smallest one, and place my pliers in the middle of that wire. And then I'm going to bring the two tails here around the pliers, like this, and same with the other one. And basically we need to form a full circle, going all the way around. So when they kind of overlap like that, we can take it out and we have our full circle. And next I want to go up 2 sizes on the bail making pliers here, so the 4th smallest one. This is just to match the beads that I'm using. Like I said, you can make this different if you want to. I'm just going to place my pliers back in there, and then have that size that I want, so I can wrap these ends of the wire, the tails again, around that size. Come all the way around, so again we make a full circle. And what I'm making sure to do as well is overlap my wires in the same direction, because then they'll kind of intertwine with the two shapes that we have. So just like that, and I'm just going to take it off, and you can see we have a full circle. And it's just what I mean there is the wires kind of crossing over and under each other. It just helps interlock it more. So then I take my other 4 lengths of the base wire there that we already cut, and again we need to find where the midpoint is, because we're working from the middle and then out towards the sides to make the braid, just to get the nice shape that we want. And then what we need to do is combine these together. So I bring back in the single one where I added those little circles already, and then we need to kind of lay these above that single one, just flat next to each other, just like that. And now this is just going to be like a temporary hold that we're going to make. So the most important thing right now is really to find a way to attach them together, but not permanently. So I'm just going to be using a bit of tape, and then bring it around the wires there. But I'm going to be working this way first of all, so I'm making sure that I'm not putting it on this space below the circles that were made. So just gently bring the tape around, and it's not going to be a perfect tight hold or anything, because we don't want that anyway. It's just to kind of help hold them together and in position. So then what we need to do is start from that midpoint here and work in this direction, obviously still using that single wire, but then also these four are split into 2 pairs. So we're going to be making the braid with these as if they were one. Now don't worry too much about the wires on the other side here. We're just going to work on this side first of all, and then once we've done that we can always go back, and obviously we need to make the other side, but if there's anything that we need to fix there in the middle. So what we need to do is start out making the braid, and it's just like a regular 3-strand braid, but obviously we're working with wires, so it's a bit different on how it reacts. But like I said, make sure you just always keep them separate. So we have the single wire and then we have the 2 pairs. And then I'm going to start just with the right one here, so the upper one with 2 pairs, with 1 pair, sorry, 2 wires, and then bring that over the second one and in towards the middle. So that's now the new middle wire. And like I said, it can be a bit fiddly here in the beginning because the tape isn't fastened really securely on there. It just kind of helps hold them together. And then what we need to do is, according to the regular braid, we then need to bring the single one, so from the other side here, over the middle one, and then as a new middle wire. So just work with it to get it in position, and then I'm bringing that over and in towards the middle. Just like that. And then we need to bring the opposite side over and in towards the middle. So I'm taking the other pair, and I like to kind of hold my fingers on the area that I've just braided, or that I'm in the process of braiding, to help, first of all, hold it stay in place, but also it helps with the shape. Now right now it doesn't look like that much, but it will start to form better. And also the actual direction of the braid coming from that midpoint, we can always correct that a bit later on as well. The most important thing now is just to get the braid started. So that's now in the middle there. Then I need to go to the opposite side again. So this is the other pair. Again, I hold my fingers onto the area that I'm braiding, and then bring that over and in towards the middle, and then to get a nice curve in it, going to hold on to it and then pull it inwards towards the middle, and that brings it over in that nice curve there. And then I recommend just double checking everything now before we move on too much, just to see if you're happy with it so far, and also keep doing that throughout. But then the next one is to bring this one over and in towards the middle, but this is then also where we need to start adding in some other loops to add the embellishment to the braid. So if you want to help with that, you can always use some pliers. So whether it's round nose pliers or these bail making pliers, that can be helpful to make the loops. But you can also just do it freehand, which is what I'm mainly going to be doing. I'm probably also going to just do it freehand, but you can always then use the pliers to help adjust the loops. So where we're at here is I have that single wire that I need to bring over and into the middle next, but I want to add in the loops. So I'm going to start just getting my wire kind of into a nice curve, but kind of in the opposite direction away from the piece, because then what we need to do is take the tail here and bring it back over itself to basically form a loop like that, and then start to bring it down in size. And then we just gradually want to make it smaller and smaller until we have the size and the shape of the loop that we want, because obviously we don't want them to be too big. Especially because what I want to do here is actually add 3 little loops. Really what you want to do is up to you. You can make it very different than this, but that's just what I'm choosing for this area right at the beginning. Just keep bringing it down. Now what I like to do is, as you can see, I kind of put my finger on it and then help pull it and bring it around, and that helps make it smaller while still keeping the shape and getting a nice shape in there of the loop that I want. And along the way I also just smooth out my wire and just keep bringing it down. I want it to be smaller than this. And this is why I also said if you want to, you can use some pliers, for instance here, to help kind of push it further down if you need to. So that can just be helpful, and I do recommend either round nose or the bail making pliers to help keep the shape, because if you say use chain nose pliers, what you can risk is you go in and grab it, and if you press too hard you make a certain little area straight of the wire, and obviously we want the whole thing to be nice and curved. And then make sure that once we have the curve in place and the loop, that you smooth this whole length out, because it needs to be ready for the next loop. And then for the next loop, we're just going to repeat the same thing. So take the same length of wire, and then just now I hold on to that first loop as well so that doesn't go out of shape, and put the tail back on itself to create the first initial shape, and then gradually bring it down to then sit next to the first loop. So again, get the size and the shape in place, bring it all the way down to the size that you want it to have. Now each of these loops don't have to be the exact same size between each other. It can also be interesting adding some different sizes. So maybe this one I'll make a little bit larger than the first one, just to add some more texture in there, a bit more of that organic feel. So far it sits like that, but then I want to add in that third one as well. Now obviously what you do want to be mindful of when you're making these loops as well is the size of them. Also think about the distance you have to cover, because if you make them too large, that might be too large in connection with the braid. So what I'm going to do is make the next one and make sure that doesn't become too big, because then it wouldn't necessarily fit that well. Obviously getting this wire back into the braid, just bring it down, and just until you're happy with the size and the shape. And again, so this third one sits next to the previous one. And make sure to smooth out the wire along the way. And you can see I'm constantly kind of holding my fingers, my thumb and my finger on them, on the whole area that I'm working on, because it helps hold everything in place. This one I'm just going to use some round nose pliers to help make it a bit smaller. Maybe something a bit like that. And there, then have my 3 loops in place. And then what you can see is this wire is already naturally wanting to come over and in towards the middle for the next step of the braid. So really all you got to do is pull it all the way over, and then it's already in position. Now this up here might still be get a bit loose, so make sure if they've kind of come out, because that's the obviously downside with the tape, you can easily pull the wires through, but make sure if they come out a bit, you just push them back up before we make the next step. And eventually once we've made a few stitches in the braid, it will become a lot more fastened, and then that won't really be a problem. So there we then have the 3 loops, and you can see that comes over nicely, and it's now naturally in the middle. And then we just continue with the next stitch in the braid. So then we're due to obviously take the opposite side, which is the pair here, make sure everything's in place, and I'm holding my fingers on the area that I've already worked with, making sure everything sits the way I want it to. And then I bring that over and into the middle. So that's now over the single wire that we just used, and this becomes the new middle length. Remember, put your finger on there as well to make sure we add in that curve, so we get that nice braid shape. And you can always keep swapping around how you hold it, whatever works the best and how you're comfortable working with it. You can see that's the new middle one now, and we have that curve in place, and you can make the braid as tight or as loose as you really want to. That's also your choice on how you want the look to be. So I do want it to be somewhat tight, but obviously also a bit loose, so we have space for the loops and you can see the braid nicely. But obviously it's wire as well, so it will only get as tight as it will. So it's not like cord where you can get the braid really tight, but just however you prefer it. So like that, and then the next stitch is bringing the opposite side over and into the middle, and getting that curve in place. And remember, every time we move a wire, I always smooth it out with my fingers, so it's basically ready for the next time it's going to be used. There's something like that. And then we need to get to the single wire again, but every time I now move this single wire, I'm always going to add in the loops, at least for now. Obviously again, how you do it is completely up to you. But then on here, what I want to then do is add in the loops in the exact same way, but obviously we're just working on the opposite side. So start smoothing it out, getting that curve in the wire in the opposite direction, and then bring it around on itself to then get that first loop in place. Make it smaller until you're happy with the size and the shape, and then make however many loops you want to have on this side. So then, as you can see here, I also added 3 loops. So I added 3 on the first time and 3 on the second one here. And then we need to continue just like before. The next one on the opposite side, bring that over and in towards the middle. And basically we just continue with the braid like this. Now what I'm going to be doing is alternating the amount of loops that I'm making per section, just because that's the look that I want. Like I said, these two first ones have done 3, and then I will go down to do 2 and then 1. But like I said as well, you can just do whatever you want and how you prefer your look to be. So now that I continued, this is what mine looks like. So like I said, I made different amount of loops throughout. So the first 2 I made 3, the next 2 I made 2, and the last 2 there I just made 1, just to kind of graduate it downwards so it gives a nice effect on the neckline as well. But then what we're going to do now is we can take off this tape because we need to flip this around and then start working on the other side. So then before we can start working on the other side here and make the same, we just need to sort out the middle and make sure we're happy with it. So what you just want to do is kind of hold it up so you're looking at it straight. Obviously we just made the one side, but then imagine the other side here is made as well. And then you just want to make sure you kind of get it as symmetrical as possible. So if you need to adjust anything, like I said, this I want to hang down in the middle, and then I want this to kind of come up at a bit of an angle. So you can then put your chain nose pliers in if you need to, and help just adjust that angle there, just so it sits exactly how you want it to. And then we need to sort out the rest of the wires as well. So this other single wire on the other side obviously need to come up as well in that similar angle. So just bring that kind of up so where the wires are coming out just above that larger circle, that they look pretty much the same on both sides. Obviously we haven't started making the braid on this side yet, but just something a bit like that. And then we have the 2 groups of the wire there, so the 2 pairs. Now what we need to do is just basically get them across to the other side, and what that's going to be is they're already crossing there in the middle, and then I'm just going to keep the kind of curved shapes, because obviously so it blends in nicely, and I'm just making sure they kind of cross over each other like that. Then I'm going to bring this one back down, and again I'm holding on to it with my fingers, and I kind of want this to be symmetrical to the other side of the top one, just like that. And then the bottom one here that's just kind of coming straight down, we need to bring that in this direction to bring it up. Now I just want to check here that I'm mirroring the other side, and actually I need the single wire to come on top of that first group. You can see that's the same because that's where I'm going to make the 3 loops first of all. And then what I then need to do is this pair that's coming straight down, that actually needs to come underneath this other pair that I already brought down. So bring it underneath and put your fingers over everything there, and then bring it up, and that's now basically the new middle one. And then we can look at it, and then it's just a matter of adjusting this until we're happy with it. So you can see somewhat nice and symmetrical there. If you need to tighten anything up, you can do that. Bring that down a little bit more and bring that up a bit more. And then again, while we're here, I'd rather kind of adjust the middle now. So I need this to actually come a bit more, because right now it'll be, when we start making the braid, it'll be coming out more of a straight line. It isn't too crucial because you can always adjust this once we've made the braid as well. You can always adjust the angles here. It's just more to make sure that we get the 2 sides as symmetrical as possible, and also distance wise. So something like this here, you can see we'll now have the symmetry right there in the middle where the wires are crossing over and under, and we now have the wires on this side ready as well to start the braiding on here. And to do that, all we're going to do really is repeat what we already did on the first side. So my wires are already in position, and I reached the point where the next wire I need to bring over and into the middle is this single one, and that's where, remember, I want to add the loops. And because it's the first one, I'm adding the same amount that I started out with on there. So we just start making the loop, and in this case I'm making the 3, and then I'm just continuing with the braid the exact same way that I showed you, and making it symmetrical to this side as well. So I then made the other side as well as symmetrical as possible, and it looks a little something like that. You can see we have that midpoint with that drop, and then we have the braids going out to the sides at a nice angle, so we get this nice shape in place. It's going to sit nice on the neckline. Now it's also at this point, if you need to adjust anything you can. So for instance, if your braids are going a little bit more flat up to the side or further up, you can just put your finger on here, right before the midpoint on the side that we need to adjust, and then push your braid up and down depending what you need to, and obviously make it look as symmetrical as possible, and it gets this nice shape as well. Now this in itself also looks quite nice just with the wire, so without adding in any beads. You can obviously leave it like this if you want to. It gives this nice elvish look to it, but if you want to add in the beads, I'm going to show you how to do that. But what we can also do now, and we might as well, is just finish off the ends. So then to finish off the end here, I'm just going to show you on one. And first of all, what I want to do is kind of just fasten this single wire. So I'm going to use the very end, the last little section there, to actually finish off all the wires. So what I'm going to do is take this wire and bring it back around those two wires laying next to each other. Then I need to bring it back down through this section, and I'm going to make sure to go on that side, so towards the middle rather than towards the end here of itself, and then we pull it all the way through, just like this here. So basically it now wraps around those two wires on the other side, and what I just want to make sure to do is actually kind of squeeze this down so it becomes more tight around those two wires. So something a bit like that, and then I'm going to bring it around again, so coming from the back there over towards the top again. But now instead of just bringing it down, I'm actually going to cut off the excess, because this is now pretty much secured in place. So I'm going to just bring in my flush cutters, cut off the excess, but make sure there's just a little bit of a tail, so it's wrapping over the top of those two wires. So I'm going to cut it off so there's just a little bit of the end of the wire here sticking out after the last wrap, so like that. And then I'm going to take my chain nose, and we need to squeeze that little end down as well. So cutting it off and leaving just a little bit of a longer length, make sure that once we squeeze this in, the actual end ends up kind of inside of this little section. And you can also just make sure to press down the very end, and then run your finger over it to make sure you can't feel it. And then when you can't, then that's fine. So that's now secured, and then we need to finish off these two sections as well. And first I'm going to take the pair here on the opposite side, it's going away from the piece, and again they're coming underneath the two wires there. I'm going to bring it back over the top, and then get the ends back down, kind of back on itself, and then we need to bring these ends through that section as well. I'm going through that gap right there, right at the top, so basically right next to themselves, and then push them through just gently. And you might need to use some pliers here. I'm just going to grab onto my wire with the pliers because you can get a better grip than you can with your fingers. Then just pull them all the way through, and you can also just do one at a time a little bit. Make sure they stay lying flat next to each other. Mine have just crossed over, so I'm just going to make sure I straighten that out so they swap places again. Because what we're then also aiming at doing is we're finishing off the wires, but we want to make it as consistent with the braid as possible, so kind of blend in as much as possible, and then bring them all the way around. So again, basically these wrap around in the same way, but we're just working with two wires at a time. Open that up a bit. You can see they're now wrapping around as well, but we also just need to tighten that up. So the same way as the other side. So just go in and then help squeeze it down, because that makes it more secure and obviously flattens it out a bit as well. And then just squeeze them together so they stay lined next to each other here. And then we have the wires coming out again on the back, kind of where they were, but we've just done that single wrap with them. And just like on the other side, I'm going to bring them from the back again. So we're already wrapping around once, but I need them to come over the top once more, basically just next to the wraps that we just did. Make sure everything stays flat. And then to finish them off, the same principle as before, we just have the two wires now that are right next to each other. Cut them off, leaving just a short tail. Something like that. So that when we go to press it down to get rid of the ends, they're going to also just get on the inside of this section of the braid. So you squeeze that down. Again, until you run your finger over it and you can't feel them. And then we just have the two final wires left. Now what we need to make sure of, obviously, is we need to leave one of them to be able to make a loop, so we have somewhere to connect this to a chain or something, whatever we want to connect it to. So what that's going to be is we're looking at it here, the top one basically, the one that's pretty much right at the tip. So I'm just going to separate that out and take my chain nose, grab onto it, and then put an angle into it, so it pretty much comes straight out from the piece. So something like that, and that's then going to be saved to make a loop with for now. So what we just need to do is also finish this other one off. So you can turn and hold your piece however you want to, but then we need to also just fasten this other one. So same principle, I'm going to bring it around and then go back through. There's just a little bit of space left, so this is basically above the other single wire that we did before. I'm bringing that down through all the way, and again then wrapping this single wire around the double wires. Again, if you need to, you can always use your pliers. Like I said, you can get a much better grip sometimes. Then bring that all the way through, squeeze it down, again make it tight, nice and tight wrap, because that makes them much more secure. Need to tighten it up just a little bit more. Something like that. And then, just like all the other times, bring it back around again, but only just laying it across, so we can finish that off in the exact same way by simply going in, cutting off the excess, and just leaving that short little end of the wire like that, and then squeeze it down using your chain nose. So again, that also ends up right in there in the middle, because that's how we get rid of the wire ends without them then being available anywhere to catch or scratch on the skin or clothes, obviously, while we're wearing it. So there we go. So now I have this single wire left, and for this we just need to make the loop with that. So first of all, I'm just going to get my chain nose pliers again, because we first need to put a bend into this. So put it right a little bit after the first bend that we have, just so we leave a few millimeters there of bare wire showing. So we need to use that to then help fasten it, and then put an angle in there, something like that. And then I'm going to get out my 6-tail bail making pliers that I like to use to make sure I get the same size loops. So on both sides I know I have the same size loop, and makes it nice and symmetrical, but you can also easily use round nose pliers if that's what you have. So place the pliers right there after that bend, and I'm just using the smallest size on these pliers here, just so it's not so obvious compared to the braid, because obviously you want it to be the main focus. Then bring the wire around the pliers here, move it however you need to, until you then get a full circle, just like that. Then I'm going to take my chain nose pliers again, put them onto over the top of that circle, and then start wrapping this tail around that space that we left underneath. So that's what we need to leave that for. And you just want to keep wrapping this around to basically fill in that space until there isn't any left, really, any more space to wrap with. Just all the way around like this, and I'm just going to squeeze it down a bit, make sure all the wraps are nice and tight. And then to finish it off, just need to cut off the excess. And again, I'm going to have the little end that I then need to squeeze in to get rid of it, so it's not going to catch or scratch on anything. So just like that. So now we have the ends finished off. So now it's time to start adding in the beads if you want to do that. So for that I'm going to be using the length of the 0.4mm wire here. And first of all we need to attach it to the piece before we can add in any beads. So what I'm going to do is I found the midpoint right on this length, and I need to get to one end first of all. And then on my piece here I'm actually going to start from the middle, so from that drop there, and then work my way out to the sides. And that's why we need to start from the middle of the weaving wire. So I'm going to go through that bottom circle in the drop, then bring it all the way through until I get to that midpoint there. And then I'm just going to hold on to it here for now, and then using just one length at a time, I just need to coil around that base wire with my weaving wire. So that means this side is coming out below, so I'm going to take that end and go through the same circle and just bring it all the way through. Just like that. And then you want to do this several more times. So take the same wire, go through in the same direction, pull it all the way through. So we now start actually getting a coil with the 0.4mm wire onto that base wire. And what we want to do is basically coil around this whole bottom part of that circle until we get with either wire there sitting on the sides, because then we also need to start adding in some beads. So now that the wires are in place there, what we then need to do is add the first bead. So I'm just going to put this aside, and then I'm going to get both ends of that weaving wire, and I'm going to add my first bead. In this case I'm using then the 3mm bead, so the small one, onto one wire first, and then put the other wire through the same bead but in the opposite direction. Just get it through the hole there, like that. And then we just need to get this bead all the way down to that bottom circle. So just gently pull it down, because obviously we don't want any kinks or anything in the wire. Bring it all the way down here, and then just going to get untangled. Pull it close to your piece. Get the wire through. You can see here we're getting it closer, and then just make sure we pull it down so it's going to basically naturally now sit in the circle. So just do it gently so we don't damage the wire in any way. Just a bit at a time. So we're getting closer to the circle. Get the wire all the way through, and then it's going to fit just perfectly in that circle right there. Now obviously we need to kind of trap that in place and also get a weaving wire onto the next place. So then what we need to do is fasten this by continuing to wrap around the base wire basically. So let me just have a look. That's coming out on the top there. So then I just grab this length of the weaving wire. You're going to be doing the same thing on the other side, just going to show you here, and come up through the circle, because there's still a bit of space around the bead there. Come up through so we can just continue wrapping around that base wire with the weaving wire, but we just caught in that bead along the way by crisscrossing the wires in it on that midpoint. So I've now wrapped it around, and then you just continue like this, wrapping around on both sides, moving your way up to the next circle. And again, we're going to then get to the middle of that one, add the other bead, which in my case is then the 4mm, because that's just how I want it to look. So the smaller one on the bottom and then the larger one on top there. Add that one there, and then keep wrapping after that bead in the same way, just around that single base wire with a single weaving wire. And then what they're going to do is right here they're going to split up and start going in each their own direction. So we're going to end up having one wire on either side, and then we need to get to this point up here, we're going to start adding in the other beads. So I then added the other bead and then got my wires up to this point here, right at the beginning where the braids go up to the side, and then where I want to add in my next bead as well. So I'm just going to show you on one side how I add these beads in. So here what I want to do is I'm still going to just follow this single wire, by the way, all the way. That's what we're going to be coiling around and adding the beads. But I've kind of gotten to this point with the first little section in the braid on this side where there's that gap in the middle, and the single wire is going through the gap. So this is where I want to add my next bead, and I'm going to be adding my 3mm round in this one. Obviously how and where you want to add your bead is really completely up to you. I'm going to add this one here, let it drop all the way down, just like that, and then I want that to sit right on that side of the wire. So that means that I need to get my end again, because I'm going to continue coiling around that single wire, but obviously what we have to do is kind of go in between the gaps in the braid and all that to be able to get the wire where we want it. So I'm following it here, and I want the bead to sit right after my very last wrap. And what I want to make sure to do as well is that I don't just let the bead drop all the way down and then kind of fasten it on the other side. I like to let it drop down a bit, but then just push it up a bit and then press it down, so we actually get, you can see just a little bit of wire there, because I want the side of the bead to be facing against the wire. Because if you just let it drop down, you'll actually more likely get the hole kind of pointing outwards, and I don't want that. But then what we need to do is continue coiling in the same direction, and then just because I don't have that much space here, I'm going to just have a look where the bead is going to sit. Then I feel like I can actually go down in that gap. So like I said, we're just using whatever gaps there are, but just making sure that we follow the direction of the coil. So I'm just pulling this all the way through, and then that's going to trap the bead in place, but then I'm going to bring it back up on the other side in that same gap. So that's how I'm making it coil around right now, and pull it all the way, and just gently here, be careful you don't kink the wire or anything when we're doing this. So basically the bead is going to sit right there, and then I'm just going to continue coiling, but I don't really feel like I have more space right there, so I'm just going to move straight to the next open gap, because the single wire there is now crossing over the top of the two wires underneath. So I'm just going to go to the gap right underneath those 3 loops on the outer edge, pull the wire all the way through, because again that's how it continues. It's getting caught there, to coil around. And just to show you, if I just continue pulling that, this little loop in the weaving wire would turn into a kink in the wire. So if you see that happening, then just undo it and then pull your wire through, because you're better off doing that to avoid damaging the wire. And then pull that all the way, and then you just push that in over those double wires underneath. And that's just how you're going to keep coiling around this wire when you have crossover wires there. Just take the next available gap and then push the wire where you want it to go. So I'm going to just continue like this and get to the next point where I want to add in my bead. So now I've gotten to that point where I want to add in the next bead, and that's just before those 3 loops. So stop there, then I'm adding my bead onto the weaving wire, letting it drop down. You can see it's going to sit just nicely there underneath, so it's not covering up the actual loops or anything. It just adds that bead right in there, in almost that little gap underneath them. And then to secure that in, I'm just going to go straight to the other side. Obviously it depends on the size of your beads as well, but this fits perfectly. And then come up through the gap to fully fasten it in place. Make sure to pull it down and then tighten the weaving wire. So that is now secured into place. And then basically that's just how you're adding your beads along the way. You keep coiling now around this single wire again, get to the next place where you want to add your bead, and you continue doing that all the way right till the end. And obviously go to the other side, use the other length of the weaving wire, and then just do the exact same thing. So I now added in all the beads on both sides. You can see it gives that really nice effect and just that purple color as well. So all that's left to do now is really finish off that weaving wire. So all I'm going to do is get one at a time, and then you're going to make sure that on the end that you need to coil it around the base wire that we're coiling around the whole time several times after the last bead. So don't cut it off too close right by the bead. You want to make sure you have several coils, and then I'm just going to cut off the excess. Make sure I leave a little tiny tail so that if you run your finger over it like that, you can actually feel it a little bit. Because I'm then going to take my chain nose and then make sure that in the direction that the wrap is going, I'm going to squeeze it down so that end of the little wire that we had left is going to get pushed to kind of continue wrapping around the base wire, but pushed into whatever gap that you have up here. So more or less ends up inside the braid, so we don't have it catching or scratching on anything like clothes when we wear it. So just tuck it away like that. And it's going to be nice and secure as well because we've made sure to wrap it around several times. Just do that on both sides. So now that we have the centerpiece of the necklace ready and done, all that's really left to do is attach something to these loops up here so we can obviously wear it. Now it's really up to you what you want to attach. It's completely personal preference, but you could for instance attach some chain. That would be a nice look. So you can either just add one long length so it kind of be an over the head necklace, or you could cut it into two separate equal lengths and attach a clasp as well. That, like I said, is completely up to you and your personal preference. So just add your chain, and if you want to use a clasp or whatever else you want to use, and then your necklace will be done. So I've now attached my chain, and then it looks like this, and it's ready to wear. So here we have the centerpiece and my chain going all the way up the sides, and I've just chosen to attach a lobster claw clasp and extender chain to it as well. And then it looks like this, so it's going to sit really nicely on the neckline with this kind of V shape to it and a little drop there right in the middle. And then obviously it matches a lot of the other Elvish braided things that I've done, so you can make sets as well if you want to. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.